Tonight on the Astronomy Show, Ray Villard tells us his favorite Hubble images. In part 2 of Making a Telescope, Dr. Chapman gives us an insight into the Galileo probe and the Galileo Space Mission. And of course, David Dodge with Astro News. All this and more on the Astronomy Show.
Hubble has really made a lot of new observations showing us that the universe is evolving. Hubble has shown us some of the farthest and most distant galaxies that ever existed, and it has shown us how the galaxies change over time, how the galaxies evolve. So we not only live in an expanding universe, but an evolving universe as well. It's shown us what's happening in the cores of galaxies, giant black holes shooting out material into space. That has been a mystery. Hubble has shown for the first time that black holes on a big scale actually exist. Closer to home, Hubble has shown us what happens to stars as they are born, as they evolve, and possibly the planetary systems may be very common because we see the first stages of a possible formation of a solar system.
Okay, the Space Telescope Science Institute is basically where all the science for Hubble takes place, and you're the public relations director. What's it like working there?
It's, no 2 days are the same. I mean, there's a lot of exploration and discovery taking place. It's been a real crossroads for major astronomers from around the world. A lot of hallway conversations about new theories, new observations, a real fermentation of what's happening in astronomy. It's almost like being on the deck of the Santa Maria, seeing the new world off in the distance. Every new picture that comes down from Hubble usually has some surprise, and to be able to be there and see it for the first time and be as puzzled as the astronomers are with some of these new revelations. So it's a very exciting place, and new discoveries coming down at such a fast rate. It's like drinking from a fire hose, or trying to.
Now, there's the Keck 10-meter telescope, which has recently come on board. Canada is participating in twin 8-meter telescopes. Other large telescopes are being built. Advances in detector technology have just been phenomenal the last 10 years. Isn't it a case that Hubble has sat so long on the ground to start with, and then you had this almost 3 years where you were waiting to get it fixed? Hasn't time passed Hubble by as a working telescope?
Oh. Hubble's optical performance is still the best game in town. Hubble can see things much more clearly even than the big ground-based telescopes, even with adaptive optics. There are certain research areas where adaptive optics are useful, but Hubble still has wider sky coverage and can look at a wider range of things and always be assured of that same sharpness with each of the pictures. The technology on Hubble can be upgraded with new cameras, so we're really not behind the curve on that. And frankly, what we do is complementary to ground-based, really not competitive. There are many programs that actually use time on the Keck telescope and time on the Hubble telescope to look at the same object. As they advance sharpness with ground-based, that'll be good because these telescopes will be able to do follow-up observations to some of the Hubble work.
What's your thoughts on the whole program?
I have been amazed by the rate of discovery with Hubble. I don't think there has ever been a telescope that has made so many inroads into so many key questions in astronomy as Hubble, and has really overturned ideas in a number of different areas. That has made it certainly, I think, worth the cost of putting it up there and maintaining it. And it has made it, for astronomy, it has really begun to trigger a revolution, and it's made it a very exciting time to be alive in terms of astronomy, to really pursue some of the very fundamental questions that answers may now be right around the corner, such as the age of the universe, the existence of extrasolar planets, and such.
Welcome to Astronomy on the Internet. Astronomy and computers is a marriage made in heaven. And with the advent of the Internet, we've managed to make an even greater marriage, the transfer of information backwards and forwards between one site and another site around the world. And it's only become really important to the public in the past few years with the comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 smashing into Jupiter a year or so ago. The transfer of information instantaneous around the world was a great help to astronomers, amateur astronomers, the media, and so on. And just recently, the Galileo probe going into Jupiter, much use was made of the internet for that. So I thought what we'd do is take a few moments and go down to Ames Research Center in California, just south of San Francisco, and see what the news is out of the Galileo probe. As usual, we'll start off with our own homepage, which is the Pacific Space Center's homepage. And with a click of the button, we'll go down to the Galileo probe's homepage, which is out of the Ames Research Center, south of San Francisco. Boom, we're there. This is the page you want to go to if you want to find more information about what's happening with the Galileo probe, not the Galileo orbiter, because the Galileo orbiter is managed by another NASA center. The Galileo probe was designed and built by the Ames research people, and here you can find all the information you need to find if you want to find out more about what was happening with the Galileo probe. Mission information, mission updates, Jupiter the planet, educational resources, the multimedia library, and communication links. Everything the amateur astronomer needs, everything the educator needs, everything the interested person needs to know about the mission, the probe, the equipment, and the results. It's quite a large document, and there's lots of hyperlinks to go in and get the latest news from the Galileo probe. Click it. Wait just a few seconds, depending on how busy it is, of course, and there you go. The latest results were issued on January 25th. Now that is just the latest results. They will be taking the data, reanalyzing the data, and probably over the next few months, next year or so, they'll be producing more and more information, and that will be on the internet, without a doubt. Well, we've gone back home because we want to leap from home, from my home page, down to Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is the overall manager of the Galileo mission. So click of the button, and we're at Project Galileo at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Pasadena, California. And this page has a whole wealth of information about the mission and the results. Some of the same stuff that's on the Galileo probe homepage, but a lot more other material too. You scroll down, and it gives an indication of when the first approach to the first moon will be. And this is updated every time you log on to this page. You'll get an update. This will change rapidly. So in 147 days, 4 hours, 50 minutes, and 59 seconds from this taping, the Galileo orbiter passes by Ganymede for the first time. And then they have a map page that you can click on to get all sorts of information, and that's repeated later on. We'll go from one side of North America to the other side of North America. We'll go from California to Maryland, near Washington, D.C., and take a look at the Hubble Space Telescope's homepage. Click on that, and you get a choice of new images. Images of nearby stars, warped disk of Beta Pictoris, planetary nebula NGC 7027, the Hourglass Nebula, or my favorite, the newest one, is the Egg Nebula. Let's just take a peek at the Egg Nebula. You always get a bit of a teaser when you open this one up. It gives you a very small image. That's why it's not taking quite as long to load up to see what the Egg Nebula might look like. Now, while the image is loading, you can scroll down in a preview. This is an absolutely fantastic image. And after we've loaded this image, we can go back and get a description of what we're seeing here. Pictures worth 1,000 words, and they offer you those 1,000 words on a different site. Comet Hale-Bopp is going to be a large item in the next little while, and you can bet that the internet will play a very large part in the worldwide observation of it. There's a whole bunch of home pages about Comet Hale-Bopp. Jet Propulsion Laboratory has a homepage site for the Hale-Bopp. I have a Hale-Bopp site bookmarked, Let's go to that one right now. It's quite a lovely one. And it's the HaleBop, www.halebot.com. It's a fantastic homepage expressly dedicated to Comet Hale-Bopp. And you might want to check that one out. All the news that fits. Now, there's not much news right now because Comet Hale-Bopp is in conjunction with the Sun, but you can bet that when that part of the sky comes into view of telescopes, we'll be learning lots more about Comet Hale-Bopp. Well, that's it for the Internet News and Astronomy, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Galileo Mission is a spacecraft that's launched to the planet Jupiter to drop a probe into the atmosphere of Jupiter and to go into orbit around Jupiter for a couple of years to study the satellites. It's a follow-on to the Voyager missions of the late 70s and early 80s that were flybys of the Jupiter system. On its way to Jupiter, it was necessary to fly past Venus once and the Earth twice just to get enough energy to get out to Jupiter. And when it went past Venus, we used our instruments, some of which had never been flown to Venus before, to measure some new features of the clouds of Venus. Flying past the Earth, we had some fun. Carl Sagan was able to prove that you might or might not be able to detect life from a Galileo probe sent to a planet like Earth. More significantly, we were able to use our instruments to observe the backside of the moon in our spectral instruments, which have never been, there's been no spectroscopy of the backside of the moon until we did it. And in fact, we had some good views of the backside of the moon, of the largest basin on the moon. So we got some good lunar science as the spacecraft was flying past the Earth. Then we flew past the asteroid Gaspra. This is the first asteroid encounter by any spacecraft ever. And these little star-like points of light suddenly became, in this case, a geological world with craters and cracks and crater chains and so on it. Then came back to the Earth again and flew out on its final trajectory to Jupiter. We flew past the asteroid Ida in the late 1993, I guess it was, and the data from Ida are particularly intriguing and show that Ida has a moon. So it's the first asteroid truly discovered for sure to have a moon going around it, and we have a lot of interesting data on the geology of this asteroid Ida. So we have had a wealth of information from what was going to be just the cruise phase of sending the spacecraft out to Jupiter. Shoemaker-Levy 9 struck Jupiter just around the edge as seen from the Earth. Now, as everyone may remember from July of last year, there were lots of prominent phenomena seen by Earth-based telescopes, but they were leaked around the edge or peered out over the edge or into sunlight. Galileo, already much closer to Jupiter and off to the side, was able to look directly as the comet projectiles went through the atmosphere of Jupiter and exploded. And so we caught the early luminous phases of these impacts, which we were the only observatory in the universe capable of doing. Everyone has plans, and there are lots of ideas about missions to fly. This is not a good decade for getting new missions off the ground, either in Russia or in Europe or in the United States. So there are no other Jupiter missions that are funded. There are ideas about missions to Jupiter. My guess is that at the moment, most of the interest in Japan and in the United States and even in Europe is for cheaper, smaller, faster missions. And the chief way you do something fast and get data back quickly before the members of Parliament or the Congress or so on are voted out of office is to send something close to the Earth, like the Moon or Venus or Mars, or maybe a near-Earth asteroid or a comet, but not Jupiter. So I'm not sure Jupiter is going to receive a lot of attention in the near future.
After being involved with Galileo for almost 20 years, do you have any final closing thoughts on the mission?
Well, it's been a real education for me. I was said to be an experimental young person when I was added to the mission at the beginning, and of course the mission was originally designed to be all over by 1986. I've learned an awful lot about NASA. I've learned about smoke-filled windowless rooms at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It's been a lot of fun during the last few years when we've been finally getting data back. And the data have been exciting so far, and I think that the data from Jupiter will be very interesting and exciting as well. It's not going to be the first exploration of the Jupiter system, but we are going to get such wonderful new data of types that have never been obtained before that I think everyone will be happy about it.
Last time we talked about telescopes and the parts of telescopes. This time we're back with Gary and we're going to talk about how to make a telescope mirror. So the heart of the telescope, though, is the mirror.
That's
right?
where 90% of the work goes in making a telescope.
What kind of work is involved in making a mirror?
Well, grinding, as we call it, grinding a mirror involves basically very simple mechanical actions. You start off with, if we want to get into this, you start off really with nothing more than 2 discs of glass. Now, you can look at these and see that this one here is clearly different than this one. This is actually made of Pyrex, which is, of course, the same stuff that bakeware is made out of. And it makes good telescope mirrors for pretty much the same reason. It doesn't expand and contract greatly with changes in temperature. It's a very important property for your telescope mirror to have. Now, the other piece of glass that you need is simply called the tool. And it is against this that you rub this. This becomes the mirror. This remains the tool. And when you're finished making the mirror, you throw that away. Now, what you do is you take some abrasive, and these come in various grades, and you work through a series of grades, sprinkle some abrasive on there, bring the mirror down on top of the tool, and start rubbing. And eventually, that will produce a convex curve here and a concave curve here. Or is that the other way around, David?
Should make this concave, I think.
I should think.
If memory serves.
Anyway, it curves that way. This one has a hill, this one has a hole. And it's the curve that you put into that mirror that determines the quality of the mirror. And after much grinding, usually with grades of abrasive starting at number 80, which is fairly coarse, all the way down to particles that are smaller than 5 microns, which is very fine, you eventually smooth the mirror surface and then you polish it and you wind up with something like this.
And that's going to show very... Oh, there, look at that.
And this is actually a finished mirror. I don't know if you can see that very well there.
That doesn't have a highly reflective surface on it. Oh, you can see some studio lights.
Yeah. Now this mirror isn't completely finished because it still has to have a coating of aluminum deposited on its surface, and that just makes the mirror more reflective. But the mirror itself is basically the carefully shaped and polished curve in the glass. And that, in essence, is what you spend most of your time doing when you make a telescope, is making the telescope mirror. The rest is actually fairly trivial.
Well, what kind of time are we talking about?
It really depends on your own work habits and, to a certain degree, how much luck you have. A 4 1/4 inch mirror, which is the diameter of this particular mirror, across here is 4 1/4 inches, that should take you, well, it can take you anywhere from a few hours to the rest of your life, depending on a lot of things. But with reasonable effort and with some guidance, normally most people can produce a 4 1/4 inch mirror in a matter of several weeks, working at it bits and pieces in evenings. So once you have the mirror, you're off to the races.
What kind of workspace are you looking at? Do you have to clean room, surgical room cleanliness, or?
No, not really. Certainly for the initial stages where you're working with very coarse abrasives, anything that's liable to contaminate the mirror is not going to be worse than what you're actually grinding with. When you get to the finer stages of grinding and polishing, yeah, for sure you want to be careful. For a workspace, what you need is basically a place where you can work, obviously, with this would be a good workspace. Some place where you can make a little bit of a mess and not have to pay heavy consequences for that. And it's also nice, although not necessary, to have a convenient source of water, save you from having to cart a bucket of rinse water around with you. And that's pretty well it. You need enough space that you can do this.
Great. Well, maybe we can do that in the next episode.
That would be fun.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Welcome to the high Arctic version of Astro News. I'm David Dodge. Well, the faces of the moon for the month of February are: full moon is on the 4th, last quarter is on the 12th, new moon is on the 18th, and first quarter is on the 25th. This month's full moon is called the Snow, Hunger, or Wolf Moon. For obvious reasons, it's called the snow moon. Just look around you. It's called the hunger moon because at this time of year there's usually not a lot of food around in the larders or in the forests. And if there's not a lot of food around, then there's a lot of weak prey, and that's where the wolves come in. So that's why we have those three names for this particular full moon. The crescent moon following the new moon on the 18th marks the end of Ramadan, the highest of holy months of the Islam faith. Some other things to look for in the sky this month, well, we have to start off with the planet Venus. Venus is at an incredibly bright star over in the southwest after sunset. It's getting higher and higher in the sky, and I predicted, and they're coming true, the planetarium is getting lots of phone calls about a UFO in the southwest after sunset. Even CBC, as it happens, did an item about a UFO over Watson Lake every evening after sunset, this really, really bright object. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out, it takes an astronomer to figure it out. That's the planet Venus. On the 3rd, Venus will be very close to the planet Saturn. By about 2 full moon diameters, they'll be separated. And that's just a line of sight thing. Venus is much, much closer to us than the planet Saturn. For you early risers, Mercury will be making an appearance in the morning sky before sunrise. It's not well placed for observing in Canada, but it's worth the effort if you're so inclined. On the evening of the 11th, and not again for 15 years, the Earth passes through the ring plane of Saturn. Now this is definitely a telescopic event, so come on down to the Southam Observatory or bring your Christmas telescope out and take a look for this event. On the evening of February 25th, Venus and the Moon will be unbelievably close together. In fact, as seen from Hawaii, the Moon actually covers the planet. It's called an occultation. Now, we're not going to see the occultation from North America, but we will see them very, very close together at about 9 o'clock on the evening of the 25th. Now, to see this event, you'll have to choose your observing site very carefully because they both set at about 9:30. So choose a clear, unobstructed western horizon that's free of trees, buildings, or hills, or anything that's going to cover your very close horizon view. That's the evening of the 25th of February. Well, that's about it for Astro News. It's getting chilly up here, and I want to go down for a nice hot cup of coffee. We'll see you next month.
The preceding program was produced through the facilities of Rogers Community 4, Vancouver. We want to hear from you and invite you to leave your comments and suggestions on our 24-hour response line message machine. Please call 731-5812.